Hey folks, I'm Sir Vainglory, and this is Anatomy of a Battle number 24. We're back in a 1v1 ranked match. This time it's the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division versus the 12th SS Panzer on the St Mary Glees map. So a few weeks ago somebody had pointed out that a lot of my battles were with the 15th Infantry Division, and asked if I would play some games with some different divisions. So I decided to go for the 3rd Canadian. I think I might have played this once before, or I've come up against it once. So this was a new battle group for me. And my plan for this battle was to try and keep fairly concentrated in the centre and just try to delay any offensives on the flanks. I thought my strengths with this particular battle group would be artillery and anti-tank units, so I wanted to get infantry into the town and use the artillery and anti-tank units to fend off German attacks. I felt that if I could take the town, I'd then be able to hold it, and if the German attacked in strength on either flank, I could push forward in the centre and threaten his reinforcements, while my own reinforcements dealt with his attack. So as I said, my plan was to try to take control of the town, so I'm sending my main body of troops there. I send a small force to protect each flank that can be easily pulled in towards the centre for support if need be, and I have a 25 pounder in position to the rear. As I'm up against the 12th SS Panzer, I don't have to worry about a devastating artillery barrage or airstrike on the town early on, so I send 4 squads of infantry in to grab it and hold it. They have a command section and a single P8 team in support in case any half-tracks show up, and a scout section that I want to get into the church tower to spot for the 25 pounder. My plan for the right is just to get sight of anything advancing there and hold it up if I can. I'm sending a scout sniper section forward to the farm to get me vision, and setting up a P8 team and a 6 pounder to ambush targets as they appear from the trees. And like on the right, I'm just looking to spot and delay any German advances on the left to buy me some time to bring in appropriate reinforcements. And again, I've got a 6 pounder with a scout sniper section and a P8 team over here. On the right, the scout snipers quickly spot a group of German vehicles advancing on the small road to the right flank. There's no sign of any armour or half-tracks, so I'm going to have to get infantry or machine guns in on this flank soon. And the P8 team in the centre spots German infantry being trucked in towards the town. I decide to send the P8 into the trees, as I think it's more likely his vehicles will advance through the field than up the road, and it's also less likely to be in route of advance of the German infantry, and I push my own infantry further forward to secure the town. On the left I spot trucks moving up, but they pull off the road into cover before getting into range of my 6 pounder. So I know that he's now advancing in both flanks and in the centre. Overall, the German seems to have decided not to rush forward. He's deployed a lot of infantry, and I suspect he's waiting until he can bring in some armour before he advances. I've taken control of the town, and you can see my 6 pounders are positioned to firing in on anything that advances in the flanks, or that attacks from the flanks in towards the town. If the Germans do push forward on one or the other flank, I'll be able to bring in additional anti-tank units or tanks to add to the anti-tank gun that's already in place. The P8 team in the centre is still watching the Germans, who appear to be holding back rather than rushing into the town, and we've got a Pak 38 positioned with a good line of sight along the main road. I'm moving my command section and universal carriers up into positions to support the infantry. On the right, the German vehicles begin to push across the field towards the farm. My sniper is about to fire on them when the first 2 stop and unload an infantry squad and a scout section. The other vehicles then do the same, and it looks like they then sit and wait for orders in the field. In the centre, it turns out that the Pak can spot one of my carriers, and it draws fire, so I sent it to take cover behind a building a bit further forward. Eventually, one of the Panzer Grenadier squads on the right begins to push forward, followed after a bit by the 2nd squad and a Pak 38. A sniper fires on the Pak crew and begins taking fire from the Panzer Grenadiers. It returns fire on them, but I don't want to risk losing it, and I pull it back into cover in the next building. So when it pulls back, it pauses in that building just to get another shot off in the Pak before I pull it back towards the trees, and I also order the P8 team to pull back to the farm behind its current position. I've ordered the 25 pounder to target the Pak beyond the town. Its firing's a bit wild to start with, but after a few shots it finds the range. I think the German has his initial setup too far back, as he's going to have to advance across a lot of open ground when he attacks. He'll need to make good use of smoke. So he begins to send his half-track forward to target my universal carrier, and it's not difficult for him to take it out. So he's taking targets of opportunity for now, but it still doesn't look like he plans pushing forward anytime soon. On the left, as I've not seen any signs of an advance, I've ordered my P8 team and the 6-pounder to move to more advanced positions. I've got infantry reinforcements and a Vickers heavy machine gun on the way in and to bolster the right flank now, and it's still quiet to the left, but my scouts there will spot anything that moves across that open ground. In the centre, after destroying my carrier, the half-track began moving in towards the town. The P8 team fired on it when it got into range, but didn't manage to destroy it. The half-track then fired in my command section, which was moving forward in the open, before falling back as the P8 team took another shot at it. Again, the half-track survived, but it was at least damaged this time. A Panzer Grenadier squad also began to approach the town, so I had my 25-pounder switch targets to that. On the right, my infantry reinforcements are arriving now, with the Vickers heavy machine gun not far behind, and I've queued up a Wasp flamethrower to give them further support. It doesn't look like there's going to be an armoured push in this flank, so I'm sending my 6-pounder over to support the centre. It's been pretty quiet over on the right, and I've ordered my scout sniper to move forward along the tree line, and it shows that the SPA troop and Pack 38 have taken up holding positions round about where I last saw them, but it also spots more trucks moving up on the right, so my infantry and heavy machine gun have arrived in good time. I'd forgotten to set the Vickers to return fire only orders, and it shoots at the SPA troops, sending them into cover. I expect that to lead to an artillery or air attack, so I relocate my Vickers further left, and I also called in a 2-inch mortar carrier to help deal with incoming infantry. It looks like the German's holding off until he's built up forces that will be able to carry out a proper attack, and I've spotted vehicles out on the left that disappeared from sight, so I'm expecting an advance there too. I'm anticipating the main German push is going to be up the centre into the town though, and I've brought in a Staghound anti-aircraft car for support already, and have a 6-pounder anti-tank gun heading for the same tree line as the P8 team to the right. On the left, an SD KFZ 250/9 has appeared in the road to the left, and another couple of half-tracks are spotted out in the far flank heading towards my rear area. They're out of range of my 6-pounder, so I'm content just to let them go, and I'll bring in a tank to deal with the half-tracks. On the right, I'm watching as the latest German reinforcements advance along the far side, and I'm wary of losing my light armour if it manoeuvres into line of sight of that pack, so I have my 25-pounder target the anti-tank gun. The 6-pounder got into position in the trees, and it immediately fired on the half-track by the orchard. It missed and the half-track began to return fire, but the 6-pounder's second shot managed to destroy it. And now on the right, I've switched my 25-pounder to fire on the Panzer Grenadiers position by the main road, and the pack recovers morale in time to fire on my mortar carrier as it arrives. I pulled the mortar off the road and ordered it to fire on the Panzer Grenadiers, but as I hadn't made sure it was in cover, the pack continued to target it, and the mortar was eventually forced to fall back after a couple of shots and was then destroyed. Over on the left, the 250/9 now reappeared out on the left flank, and it took up position on the main road. And presumably the German is trying to avoid his advanced units ending up being classed as cut off behind enemy lines. One of the other half-tracks stops and unloads the Panzer Grenadier squad at the next side road, while the other pushes on towards the next group of trees. I've brought in a ram which should be more than enough to deal with the half-tracks. As long as it doesn't get into Panzerfaust range, it'll be okay. On the right, I'd ordered my Wasp to move and cover the open ground between the tree lines, but an SD KFZ 250/9 over there appeared and fired on it, bailing out the crew and then destroying it. I decided to pull my P8 team back to deal with the half-track, but as it begins moving, 2 Panzer Grenadier squads appear in the trees and engage it, taking it out. My Staghound and Rifle squad fire in one of the Panzer Grenadier squads, and my 25-pounder fire resumed in the other. The SD KFZ then moves into position to fire on my Staghound, and they engage in a firefight until the half-track's morale breaks and it falls back. So the benefit of having an anti-aircraft gun there is quite useful. The Panzer Grenadiers continue firing on my Rifle squad though, and they have it pinned down, so I have my 25-pounder target one squad while the Staghound goes back to firing on the other until they both go to ground. There's been no movement yet in the centre, so I decide to move my rifle squads and the universal carrier further forward so that they've got good fields of fire over the open ground beyond. The Pak 38 had moved to the trees by the road junction, and it took out my carrier as it moved. And a SPA troop section then opened up in my rifle squad as it emerged from the trees, heading for the building to the left, and they engaged in a firefight. Over on the right, having recovered morale, the half-track began moving along the road towards the farm. Then it moved into line of sight of the Staghound, and they resumed their contest. The half-track was forced to retreat again, but I'd already decided to move the Staghound into cover. I also had my 25 pounder resume firing on the Pak. The firefight between the Panzergrenadiers and my rifle squad also resumed, and the Panzergrenadier squad that had come out from the trees was pinned down. I sent my second rifle squad further right to better support the first, and it engaged the pinned squad. Another Panzergrenadier squad then appeared in the farm, and my scout sniper and the Vickers heavy machine gun engaged that one. The Panzergrenadier squad in the open was eventually wiped out and by my Staghound and rifle squad, and they began moving to the right to help deal with the squad that was still in the trees. And I should mention the 25 pounder also played a part in destroying that squad. Back on the left, I decided to send a ram to deal with the two half-tracks that are still visible out in the flank, and I brought in a P8 team to go and hunt for the third half-track that had moved further forward. The ram engaged the 250/9 and forced it to retreat. We're now into phase B, and the first German reinforcements are spotted coming in on the main road. My 6 pounder fired in the lead half-track but missed, and its second shot caused the half-track to fall back, but both vehicles head for cover in the orchard. I shifted my 6 pounder further left, partly to avoid artillery fire and partly to get better vision of the other road, in case there's any reinforcements coming in there. On the right, my sniper finished off the crew of the Pak, but the half-track was once again engaged with my Staghound, and the Panzergrenadier squads were still around. So I'd ordered the 25 pounder to deal with one squad, while the sniper and Vickers continued trying to kill the other. The half-track was sent into retreat again, at a point where all the Panzergrenadiers were pinned down, so I took the chance to reposition my Vickers into the clump of trees just ahead of where it was originally positioned. On the left, the ram now moved to engage the second half-track, and it managed to damage its weapon and send it into retreat. My P8 team managed to get visual on the third half-track as they moved through the trees. It was right out in the far left. I now saw German half-tracks and Panzergrenadier squad heading over behind the trees to the left, which would be a better place for them to assault the town from. My 6 pounder fired in the half-tracks again as they crossed the open ground, but again they missed, and they drew fire from Panzergrenadier squad that had crept into the first building in the town. My 2 rifle squads there engaged the Panzergrenadiers, but they were still able to keep up their fire and eventually pin down my anti-tank gun. On the right, the scouts now have the happy sight of 2 Panzer IVs coming in on the road, where I don't have any anti-tank capability. I can't do anything but bluff it out while I wait to get an anti-tank gun or a Wolverine or something in to help me there. On the left, I've ordered my P8 team to move out towards the half-track's position, keeping to cover in the trees, and I've also called in a couple of rifle squads to deal with the Panzergrenadiers that are likely to be there, and brought up a Sherman tank to work with the ram. The plan is to clear the half-tracks from that flank and then push the tanks and infantry into the German rear areas. My rifle squads in the town are still trying to deal with the Panzergrenadiers, so I've called in fire from the 25 pounder to help them out. Another Panzergrenadier squad has now appeared in the tree line further back though, and with the tanks spotted on the road over to the left, I'm expecting the main attack to come in soon. With the Panzer advancing on the right, I set my Vickers to return fire only orders and hope it can stay concealed in the trees. I send my rifle squad in the trees and the Staghound further left to try to keep them out of harm's way. And before the Panzer had appeared, I'd called in infantry to prepare for advancing on the right. Their trucks are fired on by one of the tanks and a Panzergrenadier squad, but fortunately the infantry all managed to get out alive. Back on the left, the ram and the Sherman are hunting the half-tracks when a Panzer IV appears from behind a tree line and engages the Sherman. They exchange a few shots, with neither getting a hit, and then the Sherman manages to damage the Panzer's weapon and it falls back, while the Ram destroys the half-track that had appeared. While that's been going on, I've sent my scout sniper forward to get me vision of anything else that might be lurking behind those trees. I send two of my rifle squads in the right behind cover of the trees towards the Panzer Grenadiers while they're engaged with my other squads. My Wolverine in the centre also gets into position and fires in the German infantry. One of the Panzer force has advanced to a position where it can fire on my infantry, but the Panzer Grenadier squad's morale breaks as my infantry approaches and it surrenders. But the German must have thought that I had no anti-tank units in the vicinity, and he sent both his Panzer's force forward. The first drove right in amongst my infantry, maybe hoping to force a surrender. But my Wolverine managed to get a bead in the Panzer, and it managed to destroy it. And the second Panzer IV that was on its way in halted in its tracks and started to pull back, but the Wolverine had line of sight in that and managed to dispatch it as well. So with the tanks out the way, I ordered my infantry to begin pushing forward again towards the main road. My P8 team on the left stumbled across a Panzer Grenadier squad as it approached the half-track's position, and it was wiped out. I had my two rifle squads in that area, and I should have had them supporting the P8 team, but I didn't coordinate their advance at all. I sent my Vickers on the right from the trees into a building, and it discovered the remnants of a Panzer Grenadier squad in the farm. I had enough infantry in range to help deal with that squad, but the one in the farm on the other side of the road appeared, and the SDKFZ also fired on my heavy machine gun. The first Panzer Grenadier squad was wiped out, and the Vickers managed to get into cover, but it continued to take fire from the Panzer Grenadiers in the half-track and was eventually destroyed. And on the left, my sniper had spotted a Pak 38 waiting in the next tree line, and I decided to take a bit of a risk and have my tanks try to surprise attack. With the 4 MGs between them, they were able to suppress the anti-tank gun and take it out. Further back, my rifle squads encountered a Panzer Grenadier squad as they advanced in the open, and one of the squads stopped to return fire while the second pushed on to get into close quarters. With nothing else available, I had my 25-pounder firing the SDKFZ on the right to try to force it to retreat, but it and the Panzer Grenadiers were now targeting my sniper. The Panzer Grenadiers were eventually pinned and went to ground, and the German decided to pull his half-track back, and it sped away along the road just as my Wolverine arrived too late to get line of sight on it.
Just get me out of here.
So the German appears to be trying to consolidate his forces for now. I've got good control of 55% of the map, but I believe that German's regrouping and is still dangerous. He brings in more infantry along the road into line of sight of my 6-pounder, and it opens up, but as before it doesn't get a direct hit. The trucks appeared to be heading down the minor road towards the right, but the 6-pounder did enough to force infantry to dismount from the trucks. On the left, my rifle squad had made it into the trees and engaged the Panzer Grenadiers, but they were getting the worst of it, and when the second Panzer Grenadier squad joined the fight, both of my squads ended up being pinned down. I had decided to alter my plan and have the Ram and Sherman head in towards the centre to help defend the town, and they spotted another 2 German tanks approaching from the left. The Sherman managed to destroy one, and the German broke off the engagement by withdrawing his other tank. I had my 25-pounder fire on the position of the infantry that had been forced out of the trucks as it continued heading towards the right. And I also ordered my troops on the right to begin pushing forward again and clear out the farm, which I figured was now only lightly held. As they moved up, the Panzer Grenadiers stuck their heads up again and halted one of my squads, then targeted my sniper. But the rest of my infantry squads continued to advance though. So there have been increasing signs of forces massing behind the trees in the centre, and the infantry that was heading right now seems to be heading towards the centre as well. I have my Ram and my Sherman taking up positions to help defend against an attack, but the Sherman stops to fire on the Pioneer squad that's been targeted by my artillery. On the right, another rifle squad has now got into range of the Panzer Grenadiers, and it's also been shelled by my 25 pounder. It's soon pinned and goes to ground, but there must be another unit around there somewhere giving the Germans control of that area. But there's still a clear opportunity to push forward on the right now, and have a decent mix of infantry and armour there to make that advance. It looks like the German still has his strong forces over on the left though, and I need to guard against that. My infantry's pushing forward again, along with the Wolverine and a Sherman I'd brought in, and we discover a SPA troop section still in the farm, but it's killed off quickly. In the centre I can see more German infantry moving up towards the tree line, and I know that the attack must happen soon. And then an FW-190G1 comes in and it attacks my Sherman, which is still firing on the Pioneers to the right. The tank manages to survive the attack, but it's forced to fall back. On the left, the Panzer Grenadiers are still pouring fire into my rifle squad, and one is finally wiped out. I've tasked my 25 pounder to provide support and fire, but it's not looking good for my second squad. And further forward, a pair of Panzer IVs are advancing towards my P8 team. And they also come into line of sight of my 6 pounder, and it engages the lead tank. The 6 pounder manages to get off 3 shots on the tank and forces it to retreat eventually before the second Panzer returns fire. The 6 pounder then fires at the second Panzer, and it was able to destroy it. I reckon that the German had planned to send those tanks in to support an attack in the town, so this isolated engagement was probably much more important than it seemed at the time. In the town, my Sherman is still running for cover after being hit by the Focke-Wulf when the German attack comes in. There's a mixture of Panzer Grenadiers, Sturm Pioneers and SPA troop charge out from the trees towards the town. But with no smoke and no supporting artillery or machine gun fire, some of these units are quickly pinned down. They do have a Pak 38 in the trees behind them though, and it takes out my Sherman. The Pak then turns and fires on my Ram, but fortunately its round bounces off that tank's armour. And the Pak is then pinned by fire from the tank and the rifle squad before it can get another shot off. To the left of the trees, a group of half-tracks had been moving forward to support the attack, but my 6 pounder had line of sight on them and it engaged the first half-track, forcing it to fall back. Another half-track gets too close to my P8 team and that's also forced to retreat. But the German brings the Focke-Wulf 190 in and it manages to take out my 6 pounder. Over on the right, I've decided to push my infantry forward again to claim more ground, but I'd send the 6 pounder, the Wolverine and the Sherman towards the centre to help hold the town. In the town, most of the German infantry has now been pinned down, and only one half-track has remained to support that attack. I have fire coming in from my field artillery, which is effectively keeping the infantry pinned. The half-track then moves towards the road and into range of my P8 team, and it's able to destroy it. And my artillery, infantry and the Ram are now methodically eradicating the German infantry in front of the town, and it looks like the assault has been broken. The 6 pounder from the right is getting into the tree line to guard against more reinforcements coming in along the main roads, and the Sherman and the Wolverine are also now moving into the town. Over on the left, the surviving Panzer IV had been coming back in, but with my P8 team having revealed its position, the tank does a U-turn and retreats. I've called in a Mosquito to make a bombing run on the remnants of the infantry that had attacked the town, and it's able to finish off a couple of the squads. And the half-tracks to the left that had been forced to fall back had started heading forward again, and they engaged my P8 team. The P8 returned fire on them, and it was able to force one to retreat. And with the infantry now gone, I have my artillery target the half-tracks to try to force them all to withdraw. And out on the left flank I've brought in another rifle squad which has managed to destroy one of the Panzer Grenadiers, and the artillery has suppressed the second, allowing my infantry to advance. On the right, my advancing infantry shows that flank to be clear, but my sniper scouts spot a Sturm Pioneer squad in the trees ahead of them. I plan to send my 2 rifle squads in the trees on the other side of the field in towards the orchard to try to attack any German units there from the flank. Back in the centre, Junkers 88 comes in and it attacks my ram. The tank manages to survive the attack, but it's still forced to retreat. And the scout snipers to the right show me that there are Panzergrenadier squads moving back through the orchard and 3 Sturm Pioneer squads falling back from the tree line. So we'll bring in another Mosquito to bomb the Sturm Pioneers as they withdraw, and it destroys 1 squad and manages to pin down the other 2. The advance over in the right flank is going well, and I'm confident that his forces in the centre have taken enough of a beating that I have the advantage there too. There's not been much change in the left though, so I'm planning to send the infantry forward to flush out whatever he has holding that ground. I decide to push a bit further forward in the centre now and send my P8 team to take up position in the building by the road junction while the armour moves up to the edge of the town. The Wolverine catches sight of one of the Sturm Pioneer squads and is able to pin it down before it gets into cover of the trees, and the Sherman then moves up and it adds its fire to the attack on the Sturm Pioneers, and the squad is eventually destroyed. My infantry on the right is now pushed right up to the end of the orchard without finding any enemy units, but it looks like there could be something in the trees beyond. I could have just held position where I was, but I decided to try to keep pushing it and see if I could close off the reinforcement point by the main road. With the armour in position covering the approaches, I send my scout section forward and move a couple of rifle squads into position in the tree line. And as the infantry pushes forward, on the right, a Sturm Pioneer squad opens fire from the trees. All 4 of my squads initially stop to engage it and quickly pin it down, before I give one of the squads orders to push forward and try to force the surrender. I get glimpses of a half-track approaching in the field beyond the trees and suddenly remember I've no anti-tank unit supporting the advance. I do have a couple of Mosquitoes though, so I'll have to rely on them. A German Tiger appears in the road approaching the town to the right. My Wolverine there spots it and fires, but its shot bounces. The Tiger returns fire and it destroys the Wolverine. And on the right, a Panzergrenadier squad appears in the trees and fires on the rifle squad that had pushed forward. My rifle squads and command section return fire, but my rifles are pinned in the open. The half-track pushed up around the trees, pinning one of my squads over there before heading in to support the German infantry. I brought in a rocket-equipped Typhoon and had it try for a flank attack on the Tiger, but the Tiger had turned and it took the attack front-facing. So it survived and it wasn't even suppressed. And having survived the attack, the Tiger then turned to support the attack on the infantry to the right. My infantry had managed to pin the Panzergrenadiers down and it looked like we were getting the upper hand, but then the Panzer IV appeared over by the half-track, doubling my trouble. I decided that I had to send my brave P8 team through the orchard towards the tree line in the hope that it would be able to ambush the Tiger if it moved towards the town, and also sent my Sherman forward to shorten the range and give it a better chance of a kill too. But on the right, the Panzer IV and the half-track made short work of my rifle squads, and the other squads had also been pinned by the Tiger, so trying to push for the reinforcement point turned out to be a poor choice. On the left I've brought in a Wolverine to support the advance, but I've sent the infantry on ahead, assuming that I'd killed everything the German had over here, but my rifle squad encountered Germans in the farm beyond the trees and was wiped out. Back by the town, the Tiger begins edging forward and came into line of sight of my Sherman. The Sherman hits the target, but it only managed to break the Tiger's tracks. I'd brought in a Mosquito at the same time to try to suppress the Tiger, which it did, but as it's been immobilised, the suppression turns out to be less effective. And at the same time, the German had brought in his Focke-Wulf 190 to attack my Sherman, and my tank was forced to retreat by the bombs. And the Tiger spotted the Sherman as it fell back, and it fired on it, but fortunately it didn't damage it. But the concentrated fire from the Tiger, the half-track and the Panzergrenadiers is slowly whittling away the last of my infantry on the right, and my attempts to suppress units with artillery fire isn't having much of an effect. Out on the left, my second rifle squad emerged from the orchard and was pinned down by the Panzer Grenadiers in the farm, so I sent my Wolverine and Scout Sniper towards the farm on the right of the road, where they should be able to get line of sight on the Germans. Artillery fire finally forced the half-track on the right to retreat, but I have only the remnants of one rifle squad left there in the trees. So I called in reinforcements to set up a defensive position on the right flank, but the half-track and the Panzer IV ended up being pulled back rather than pushed forward to reclaim the ground, and I assume that the zone of control exerted by the two guys in the forest made the German think I had units holding the territory that I had taken. A second tank, this one a Panther, arrives in the field by the Tiger. It moved through the field towards the orchard, and I couldn't decide if it was going to support the right flank or get into position to fire on the town. Whichever it was, I didn't think my 6-pounders were going to be up to the task of killing it, but they should be able to suppress it if they live long enough. So I hold 70% of the map now, and I'm in a strong position. I've got a 17-pounder anti-tank gun moving up on the right to deal with the heavy tanks, and also have an Achilles tank destroyer and more infantry coming in the centre. The Panther was spotted again as it moved through the orchard, and one of my 6-pounders fired on it without much of an impact. The other 6-pounder also fired but missed, as did the Ram, but unbelievably the Panther fired on my Staghound, giving all my units a chance to get another round off. The Rams managed to score a bounce on the Panther, which was enough to finally break the Panther's morale and force it to fall back. On the left, the Wolverine was now in position to provide supporting fire for my rifle squad, and I sent my sniper forward to get into firing position. The Germans managed to pin the sniper in the open though, but the Wolverine was eventually able to suppress the Germans and they went to ground. And you can see that there's a group of half-tracks further back there. I called in a Mosquito to bomb them, and it was able to suppress them. And the Wolverine also spotted them and began to fire on them. But the German repaid the favour by bringing in a Junkers 88 to bomb my Wolverine and destroyed it. So the 17-pounder anti-tank gun that I'd brought in on the right, I decided to send that into the trees to help deal with the Panther, and I sent the rifle squads out to watch for any Germans that might advance on the right flank. The neutral view shows that there were still plenty of German units in the area, but my opponent clearly felt that his position was hopeless and he decided to surrender. So I got a comfortable victory, partly due to the fact that my opponent lacked aggression. If he'd pushed harder on the right flank and broken through there as well as on the left, he could have caused me real problems. But I think he wanted to attack simultaneously in the centre and on the right, which gave me time to stabilise things and prepare my defences. And being able to take out the tanks he sent out on either flank crippled his plans. He didn't make any use at all of artillery, and I was wondered whether he got to a point where he lacked the points to spend on it because he was having to replace losses. But I think artillery would certainly have made a big difference, especially if he had used it to support his attack in the town. That turned out to be too easily repulsed. So, I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks very much for watching. Please leave me a comment and rate the video, and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the content, and I hope to see you again next time. Cheers.